Right, we are 5. Yep. We've got a 10-minute countdown. 25. Cameras come on at 1:45. Demo starts at 7 o'clock. There we go. Let's try that, shall we? We'll start again. It's all going well so far. Right. Oh, look. Blushing a bit. Right, okay. Good evening, everybody. Hope you're all well. Thank you for joining us. It's great to see, 119 people here across all the various platforms tonight. And now, Les and I haven't demonstrated before together. I'm normally sat here and Les is normally over there doing his bit. But this evening we are going to share the demonstration for you in what I'm sure will be a very entertaining and very informative and inspirational evening for you guys too. There's loads of chat going on. We can see the chat here across Facebook, the various Facebook pages and YouTube, and I think there's about a 30 to 40 second delay from when we do something to when you guys see it. So if things don't quite work for you, then there's nothing we can do about it. It's just the internet delay from here to Facebook and or YouTube. So we've got how long is it? We've got about 13 minutes before we get going. So if anybody does have any questions before we start, then if you could drop them in the chat now, I'll do what I can to answer them just while Les finishes getting ready. Good evening, Nick, the sci-fi guy, Mike Butterfield, Mole Valley Maker, hello, welcome to you too. Pete at Twisted Trees, good evening Pete, and Gerard in Ireland. Let me just scroll back up through the chat. Mark Pritchard, Robert Dolman, Michelle Higgins, good evening, good evening, good evening. Steve at SK Crafts, hello mate. Nice to see you. Marcel Durett, good to see you too. Wyvie Woodshed, Joseph King. There's plenty of names that I'm familiar with, plus a host of names I'm not familiar with either, which is always good to see. Les is whispering. Gerard says, will this video be... Oh, I think it's just disappeared off my screen. I think Gerard said, is it going to be recorded? Well, Gerard, as it is on Facebook and YouTube, it will be there ad infinitum. I will probably move it off of YouTube in about a week's time, but it will stay on the various Facebook pages. Although it also depends upon how good the demo is, of course.
I swear. I swear tonight, am I?
Yeah, that mic is on now.
Is it?
Yeah, it should be. Oh, it's not. It's not going live through here yet. So when you. Oh, good evening, Terry Bone. Your mic is off at the minute. No, it's on there, but it's off here.
That's on speaker.
Yep. Right. Good evening, Jeff Spearling and Richard Phelan. Nice to see everybody. 141 people now. We will get going. We do have a short health and safety video to show you just before we get going. Mark, yes, I think Les had a great time in Plymouth. Thank you very much. Yeah, we're beginning to get back into the in-person demonstrations now. So Les has been out and done 2 or 3 demos, live in-person demonstrations in front of real people recently, and I've got my first live demo back on Monday. Glad to hear that, Terry. Your bed extension has arrived. Evening, John Galloway. Yes, Renee, you did forget to call me. Give me a call in the morning, please. Tomorrow morning will be great. I don't know how many people are watching on each particular channel, but we haven't got started yet. About 9 minutes, well, about 4 minutes, and we'll kick off with a health and safety thing, and then Les will kick the demo off. Have you glued it on now? Yeah, all right. Do you want your mic to go live now? Okay. That it's on there, but it's switched off here. Don't worry. Boo, boo, boo. What, here? Yeah. That's just a support message. Okay. Jeff Crone, probably not for you. Does anyone know of any woodturning clubs in Minnesota? Oddly enough, Jeff, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the geography of Minnesota or any woodturning clubs. But if you check out the AAW, they will undoubtedly have a list of chapters in Minnesota for you. Mole Valley Maker, our internet connection is going out nice and smoothly, so if there's, well, not the same as any live thing, if the image does get choppy, there's nothing anybody can do about it, but our internet connection is going out with 4 green bars. And Jennifer, do we still have to call you to book an appointment to the shop? Yes, you do, Jennifer, I'm afraid. The building work is still ongoing and will be ongoing till at least October. So if you could give us a call at the shop to book an appointment, that would be really, really helpful. Ba, ba, ba. I didn't know. Well, okay, I'm going to kick off with the... Right.
Are you shutting this door or leave it open?
I'll leave it open. Okay. Get a bit of airflow. Okay, right, I'm going to do the health and safety bit, and then at the end of the health and safety bit, I'll switch your mic on. Okay. Right, we're going to get started just a few minutes early with a little bit of a health and safety video for you. Yes, if you are happy with that, it's only a couple of minutes long, but it's important that we do convey the health and safety aspects around the workshop. So it'll just be a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back and Les will get started. Before we crack on with the demonstration, let's just have a little think about PPE before we get started. When in the workshop, make sure that you are doing everything you possibly can to look after yourself. That includes wearing a full face shield like this one, or at the barest minimum, a pair of safety glasses like these. Or for the best protection, you could wear a full face shield and respirator setup like this one, but make sure the batteries are charged before you start. When you're sanding, make sure you are wearing a suitable dust mask or a half mask like this, or one of the powered respirators, and you have your extraction running and windows and doors open as well. And if you are using any chemical products or colours, make sure you look after the skin on your hands, particularly if you have sensitive skin, by protecting them with some suitable gloves like these nitrile ones. And finally, make sure that you follow the manufacturer's instructions for the lathe, any tools that you use, and any other products that you apply to your piece. That's it. Please do enjoy the demonstration and have fun and be safe in your workshops. Okay, right, there we go. That's the health and safety bit over and done with. And now it does give me great pleasure to introduce my co-demonstrator for the evening, Mr. Les Thorne, RPT.
Good evening, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. It's very difficult not to sort of say hi to everybody that's appearing on the screen on the right, but I do have to say a special mention to my friend Sue in Canada. I hope you're keeping well, Sue, and I hope you enjoy the demo. So what are we going to do today? Well, normally when I do a joint demo, especially with somebody who is a colorist, for want of a better expression, like Martin, is to do something that I do the turning, he does the decorating. And a good project for doing something like that is a pedestal bowl, or what traditionally would be called a tazza. So we have this bowl here. Okay, it's a very traditional shape. It actually appears as a stand, as a plant stand in the book Classic Forms. Okay, by Stuart Dyas, which is a good book, and if we can find a link later, we will put that on there for you to purchase. It's one of those books that just is full of load of line drawings, but some fantastic shapes to do. So this is a sort of project that will work quite well as a pedestal stand. It will also work as a pedestal bowl. You can make it shorter, longer, wider, bigger in proportion and stuff like that as you go. But it's a good project because it's faceplate and spindle work, and we'll talk about that whilst we're working at the lathe. So what I'm going to do and how we're going to play this, and like Martin said earlier, we've not done a demonstration together as a joint demonstration. I mean, he's teched for me, and I've sometimes poked my head around the door and he's been demonstrating, but that's pretty much it when it comes to working together. So you have to bear with us at times because there will be a little bit of a swap over, because Martin works the cameras when I'm demonstrating, and when Martin's demonstrating, Martin works the cameras. Okay, because it just is easier than these big fat fingers pressing little buttons. It would all go horribly wrong, and you'd end up with that black screen and it going boo like that. Okay, if I start mucking about with the tech. So I will be on hand to answer questions as we go. Okay, so what we've got to do is I've got to I'm going to do the base first. So order of tooling, what do? Do we do base, do we do bowl, do we do stem? Well, we're going to do the base first. So the base is a simple project to do. It's faceplate work, okay, and it would be the sort of project you would do as if you're making a stand for a lamp, a candlestick, or even something like a trophy base. But we can work through some simple tooling techniques as we're going. We're not going to get too technical tonight, okay? I want to concentrate on sanding, which is a bit of a strange thing to do in a demonstration, sanding, because most people like making shavings and like being creative. But I'm going to talk through that wonderfully boring world of sanding to try and get you guys maybe to up your level in your sanding and stuff like that, and some of the techniques that I've learned as a production turner through the years that will hopefully help you guys as you go. So what we're going to do, we're going to mount it to the screw chuck. This piece is quite shallow. The piece of wood is quite shallow. We're going to screw on a little spacer first. Okay. And we're just going to screw that on there. Now, the top of the piece is that way. So that hole will be the hole that's been made in the blank screw chuck will be removed when I do the hole for the stem. So what we have there, we have our blank mounted up on the screw chuck like that, and it's simple. We're going to make it round, we're going to stick a recess on, we're going to bang it round and then turn away the shape. So first things first, we're going to work fairly quickly today. Okay, probably not quite full production speed, but I'm going to work quite quickly. So instead of going through all the tooling aspects like I would normally do in a demonstration. So what we have here, we have a bowl gouge. Okay, Irish, Celtic, long grind on it. But for this particular cut, I could quite easily use a traditional grind. All we're going to do here, tool rest line is in the direction of the cut, and all I'm going to do is make a very simple cut to there. Check to see if it's round, which it isn't. Come in and we're now round, and then just coming off that side there, because what I don't want to do is I don't want to push that wood off there. fine. Okay, and now we need to just create a recess. Now the recess in the bottom's not an issue. The piece would be covered in baize. Okay, if it was a lamp or if it was a lamp or a candlestick. But even if it was a lamp, what would happen is I'd have a hole all the way through for the flex to be turned at an angle. So candlestick, pedestal bowl, anything that's liable to go on a polished surface, I have no problems with putting baize or felt on the bottom. But do it properly. Don't just, stick a piece on with too much glue and cut round it with a blunt pair of scissors. That's not how to attach baize nicely. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a recess. So I'm marking up using the left-hand point of the dividers only. And I'm going to create just a shallow recess there. I do the initial work with the gouge. Just making sure that as I come to that side there, I close the flute. And then just to create the angle, I could just go in with a skew chisel. And that now is done. I don't need to do anything else with that. I have kept it quite shallow, and what I do commercially, if I'm making a lot of these or a lot of candlesticks or lamps, I actually make these 3mm deep, and then I use a piece of hardboard that's cut 3mm, it's the same size, to put in there before I cover it to make sure that the it doesn't go through and create a hole through the baize. Okay, so I'm just going to go in there now and just make that a little bit flatter on the bottom, and hopefully now it's ready to turn round. Okay. Now you notice that the piece has basically a nick out of it. Okay, where I've cut it. Don't forget, when you're shaping a piece, you don't need to make the piece at the board completely round. That will be lost in the shaping. And we're about halfway through the piece now, and if I was making more than one of these, of course I would do all the bases in one go to save me having to swap over into this mode to hold these. Now I very rarely use a recess, okay, it's only basically when I'm doing a project like this that I do, so my chuck jaws aren't quite as sharp on the edge here as they could be. Okay, so what I would do with this sometimes is I would just sharpen those up a little bit, or clean them off at least to get the paint off, because then that will give me a better grip. So that's running nice and true. I should be able to do it without the tailstock in. Okay, I'm going to do my first cut will be quite tentative, but in a demo I am going to go belt and braces. Okay, if I can move the tailstock, there we go. So I'm going to go belt and braces. I'm just going to literally just touch the tailstock, the center, onto the piece. Don't go too mad with it. Okay, you just want to be literally, it's almost to stop it coming off rather than to hold it on, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So we're down in that like that. Okay, we're going to swap to the smaller tool rest. Okay, so this is our own design tool rest. Okay, and now we're just going to do some shaping. So initially what I'm going to do is just get rid of some of the bulk of the material. So it's very straightforward. It's a large cut, sycamore. A piece of sycamore like this cuts very freely. So all I'm going to try and do is just try and get rid of as much bulk as possible. Okay. Okay, right, so I'm just going to go in here. So there's our rough shape of our OG. and we're just going to go over now and just finish this edge. Now to cut with the grain on faceplate work, I need to be going that way rather than that way. If this was a piece of spindle work, as we'll go on later, we would go from the big diameter to the small diameter. To cut with the grain on faceplate work, where the grain is running that way as opposed to that way, we need to work from the small diameter to the big diameter on the face. So there we go. So there's our cut. Okay. So what we're going to do now is just analyze the shape that we want. So we've got a very simple ogee there. Okay, I'm going to work that right the way down to that edge there. And what I have to be careful when I'm doing this is to drop the tip of the tool in. If I drop the tip of the tool in, the tool will skate. So what we've done there, we fixed the diameter of a piece. All we need to do now is create a hole and then just finish the outside shaping. So that's quite a nice piece. That should colour up quite nice. There's a little bit of ripple in there. Okay, so that should pick up. Now we're going to make a bit of a mismatch of pieces, okay, in the fact that we're going to do a sycamore base, sycamore top, and we're going to use a piece of oak for the stem, and it might not tie together. We might discover something completely new, but I probably think not. But it will show you as many techniques as possible in the turning and the colouring, and of course the sanding. If I can keep you awake demonstrating sanding, I know I'm a pretty good demonstrator. Right, so what we're going to do now, we're going to drill a hole in there. So we'll use a tailstock mounted drill. Okay. The drill is 30 millimeters. There is a reason for that. There is a reason why I like 30 millimeters. Well, there's actually a couple of reasons which I will go through a bit later. So what we have now, we have a start for our shape and we have a finish for our shape. And I'm actually going to just remove a little bit of depth off this, just to improve the shape. So I'm just going to take a little bit off here. Okay, and I'm going to mark using the corner of the skew a little part there. Okay, so we have a little diameter marked on there, and then I'm just going to do the shape. So here we go. So here's a shape all done in one pass. I can use this tool as long as this curve, this convex part here isn't too steep or too, I should be able to get all the way around into there. So there's our shape, a very simple ogee, a very traditional shape. Okay, for those of you that don't know what an ogee is a flattened S shape. So if you imagine that as it goes around there, to be slightly more traditional, it could probably tuck in a little bit more there. So that curve there matches that curve there. But for this piece, that is absolutely fine. So what we're going to do, we're going to go through our first stage of sandpaper. Okay, the thing about sandpaper is it's very rarely ever made of sand, and from a wood turning point of view, it's very rarely made of paper. And a lot of you will have your favourite when you're doing. I actually use different types of sandpaper for specific jobs. Okay, what I found is that some sandpapers work better on some woods and some sandpapers work better on other woods. And the other thing you've got to watch out for is that some timbers will blunt abrasive very, very quickly, and oak is one of those. Okay, I find oak blunts abrasive quite quickly. Okay, and obviously that you know that resinous timbers like pine will clog abrasive up. So it's about finding the right abrasive that suits the majority of your work, or having a range of abrasives in the workshop that you can call on, depending on what job you are doing. So the first abrasive I'm going to show you, okay, is this stuff. Okay, this is Norton R222, okay, which is a very flexible J-weight cloth. Okay, so it's a very flexible abrasive there, and it will fit into all the nooks and crannies. And people just don't sand these things properly. What they do is they just hold it against there. Okay, now when you're sanding on faceplate, try and get it in little circular movements. So try and keep the abrasive moving. The one that with our piece of 180 grit is a pretty good sanded finish already. Okay, and from a commercial point of view, that's pretty much what I sand down to if it's going to be painted. Okay, so if it's going to be finished on, on site or back at the customers. But we're going to go that little bit further on this, so we're just going to add some other abrasives. So the other abrasive that's used quite regularly nowadays is the Endasa Redline. Now the Endasa Redline, of course, is Velcro backed. So we'll be using that for our power sanding later, but obviously with this one it's a very, very, very high quality abrasive. Okay, it's a very, very, very high quality abrasive, but not quite as flexible. So when we come to do our spindle work, it won't be as flexible in our spindle work as the R222. So I can keep the same thing going here. Keep it moving wherever possible. Now I could of course power sand this or use a rotary sander, but not everybody likes the dust that creates, and some people just like the feeling of finishing the piece by hand. Okay, so what we have on there now is you feel like you're getting a bit of a shine on the piece. Okay, now the thing about a shine on the piece is I don't want a shine on the piece. Okay, if I put a shine on the piece with abrasive, generally it means I'm burnishing the surface, and if I'm burnishing the surface, okay, I'm not sanding it, but I'm also adding heat, which can be a problem if I'm working with some woods that will crack on the end grain or craze on the end grain when you put too much heat into it. So things like the fruit woods, yew wood, they are woods that are very, very prone to that problem. So keep it moving, and remember you should always be getting dust. If you start to polish the wood, it means your sandpaper is not cutting. Okay, your abrasive is not cutting, and then you've either got to throw that abrasive away, pick up a new piece, okay, or you've got to press a little bit hard, or you may be going a little bit too quick. But generally I would sand this type of work at the same speed that I turned it at. So this idea of always turning the speed down when you're sanding, I don't really personally get into that unless I'm doing a bowl or something like that. But on a piece this size, generally I'm running it. I can tell you the spindle speed is around 1300 RPM, and I'm more than happy to sand that at that speed. So in effect now, apart from just taking the little tiny sharp bit off the back, we're now ready for the finishing. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Martin.
Oh, is that me now?
I'm going to hand over to Martin to come and and throw some stain on this. So this is our first swap over, so it's bound not to go smoothly. So do bear with us while we're doing it. Okay. Okay, so Martin has to unplug some tech and bring it over here.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. I'm going to unplug this and then go over there.
Okay, so this is going to happen absolutely perfectly. I'm going to unplug my microphone. Oh. Something went a noise like it was plugged in. This is going to see perfect. Here we go. I can turn this mic off.
You can turn that one off, yeah. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Yep, I can see my bars going up over there. Just make a small adjustment over there. That should be probably about as good as we can get it.
I'm not live, but I'm on this microphone.
You are, yeah, so anything you say will be heard through that microphone. Right, okay, here we go. Right, finishing. Forgive me if I'm a little bit out. I have been trying to sort out a couple of technical issues with Restream and our stream going out. But we are going out with green bars. So if you are suffering from any kind of lag, there is nothing I can do about it. So please don't bother commenting about it, because there's nothing I can do about it, I'm afraid, from here. Right. So finishing. We've got a nice piece of sycamore on here, and I do need to run through this fairly quickly because there are 2 other pieces that we need to be getting through this evening. So Les has sanded that down to 400, was it?
Yes.
400. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to put some colour on there, but I want it to kind of not necessarily match, but be fairly similar to, or complementary to, the oak stem that Les is going to be turning again in a minute. So we're going to go with some browns and a little bit of black on here, just to really darken this sycamore down. So I'm going to put some gloves on.
Sue's just asked if we use compressed air to remove the dust between sanding grits. Sue, not on a wood like sycamore I don't tend to bother. If I was turning ash and maybe on the oak I might, but on the sycamore it's quite tight grain, so we don't bother.
Yeah, I would do exactly the same thing, and I will be using an air compressor on the oak bit when we get to it. Right, okay, why colour wood? Well, I like colouring wood because I can, and it just adds something to the work a lot of the time. I'm just looking for my earth colour. It adds something a lot of the time, but I'll talk more about that on the top side, or the top part of the piece. So I want to go dark but not too dark, so I'm going to start off with some earth colour. I'm using water-based colours tonight. I prefer water-based colours to alcohol-based colours, because they give me a little bit more control over moving the colour around before they dry off. It's a little bit warm in the workshop tonight, so this earth colour will dry fairly quickly. And this first coat I'm just putting on relatively fast to make sure that I get an even-ish coverage, and then I'm going to go over the top of it with some black just to darken it down a touch. Get right in there as well. You know, it's been ages since I've done a live demo that hasn't been a Zoom meeting, so it's interesting and it's fun to be back, despite the occasional technical problem, which I think I've sorted out at least. So I'm using kitchen towel. I much prefer to use kitchen towel than cotton rags when it comes to applying colour, simply because when the lathe starts up, there's no chance of having a cotton rag being caught in the lathe or the chuck or anything like that. And what I'm doing here, I'm not sure if you can see it particularly, that camera might do quite well. I'm brushing the colour on here, so I get a line at the top, and then where it comes off, I'm just catching the bottom little half bead just down there. That's going to give us a little bit of an antique-y look. And I'm going to put a little bit more of the earth colour over the top of that as well. And really get that into that little rebate just there.
It's a fillet, Martin.
Fillet, that's what it's called. I'm all over the place this evening since we've had those since we've had those little technical things. Okay.
It's quite interesting at the moment about I mean, I've been following a lot of internet stuff lately, and there seems to be a nationwide internet problem. I'm sure there is.
I know Sky have had some severe problems today.
Yeah, I think they're so I do, you know, once again we apologise. It's beyond our control, I feel.
But there is nothing we can do about it.
No, we'll just keep carrying on until the last man standing.
Yep.
Be one of us two, probably.
Yep. Okay, right, so there's the colour on. You can see that here. It's nice, it's fairly even. It's a little bit brighter on the screen than I can see it here. And I'm just going to dry it off with a hot air gun.
For those of you who don't know, there's marks on the wood. It's basically the figure in the timber. There's a stain that's penetrated at different rates.
Yeah, just here. Just here you can see that really well. Just here you can see these marks here. We've got two or three different densities of wood. So where it's darker, the dye has penetrated the wood more here than it has here, which is why this bit appears to be a bit lighter. Okay, right. Calm down, slow down. There's no need to rush.
He's trying to work as quick as me.
And I have just squirted sanding sealer everywhere because I forgot I'd actually filled it up before we got started. Right, so after the colour has been applied, seal it, seal the colour in, make sure that all of the wood fibres are properly, nicely sealed all over, and that will enable you to put on a nice even finish at the end, rather than having the end grain soaking in or sucking in any kind of finish that you put on. So I'm going to use my preferred sanding sealer, which is obviously the Hampshire Sheen pre-thinned sanding sealer. Make sure we get enough on to cover the piece, and as you can see, the sanding sealer here is being sucked right into the piece, which is going to be a little bit of a challenge to finish.
And this is air dried sycamore, which should be slightly better than the kiln dried sycamore, you know, to resist the soaking in aspect of it.
You can see that just going in there. That's very typical of figured woods. Very thirsty, particularly on the end grain and over figures. So I'll just let that soak in and dry off for a few seconds, and I'll just slightly adjust this camera as well, ever so slightly. There we go, that's a bit better. You can see there it's almost dry now, but just because it looks dry doesn't necessarily mean it is. So I'm going to encourage it to dry a little bit with some kitchen towel. I don't normally recommend you dry with kitchen towel, because if you get the sanding sealer too hot, what can happen is that it can essentially sort of blister and congeal, because there are plant extracts in cellulose sanding sealer. It's essentially plant fat. So I'll just encourage that to dry before I put on another coat of the sealer, and then we'll move on to a finish.
Don't forget to fire some questions into the chat, and I'll try and keep up with it if I can.
That's better, that's not soaking in quite so much.
I may not be able to press any buttons, but I can just about read. Put it in simple to use English though.
Let that soak in too. And then again, I'm going to encourage it to dry. And if you do use a kitchen towel to encourage the sanding sealer to dry, it also denibs the piece as well. You hear a lot of people talking about denibbing sanding sealer. This also does that at the same time too. Right, so I'm going to leave that there for a second and grab a texturing tool. Right, my favourite texturing tool is this one here from Robert Sorby. It's the mini texturer. The mini spiraling and texturing tool, and it's absolutely ideal for working on fairly small diameter pieces like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the tool rest down, so I'm cutting right about on the center line, and I just want to put a little band of texture just about there, just over the hump of the OG, just there. So I'm going to slow the lathe right down. I like to do this at about 480 RPM, something like that. I know it's a little bit precise, but somewhere around 480 works really well. And that's just about on the centre line. So all I'm going to do is put a couple of little runs of texture in here, just changing the angle slightly as we go. And then speed the lathe up. I don't think one of those lines has worked just as I wanted it. Speed the lathe up and put a little mark underneath there and one on top. Then we can stop that and have a look. Oh yeah, that's come out quite nicely. Just use a little grey pad just to take away any fluffies, and then that has given us a really nice textured surface that we can put some wax into. Let's just move that over there a touch.
Thanks for that, Ben. Ben says the more beer I drink, the less the video drops out.
That's good.
Just thought I'd pass that tip on.
Thanks, Ben. Right, so why have I coloured it, sealed it, and then used the texturing tool? Well, what I find with the texturing tool is that if the piece is sealed, then the fibres are a little bit stiffer and they break a little bit better underneath the pressure of the texturing tool than if I was to do it beforehand. Because if I was to do this before the colour, whether it's alcohol based or water based, any tatty fibres in that texture are going to soak up the colour and not leave quite such a crisp texture. Stephen Rickett, I used the intrinsic earth and the black on here.
It's also worth, if you're going to do some texturing, especially with the Strawberry tool, it's worth before you finish the shape, take the time and have a little practice to see what it's like before, see how the wood behaves under the tool before you commit to it.
Gianna, what speed do you do the texturing? Gianna, I prefer to do it under 500 RPM, somewhere around 480 RPM with a small diameter piece like this. Good question, thank you for asking. Okay, now we're going to use some gold embellishing wax in there just to pull that out, because on the oak piece we're going to be embellishing that with some gold as well, probably, or maybe even some black. I'm not absolutely certain yet, but the gold here is going to sit nice and deeply in that applied texture.
Scott Hampton, Martin used the Sorby
micro spiraling tool.
Spiraling tool.
Now these embellishing waxes are designed specifically for open grain wood and added texture. So what I've done here to illustrate the reason why they're designed specifically for texture and open grain woods is because they don't stick to a very smooth surface.
Can I get a very smooth surface?
Well, it's fairly smooth.
Oh, fairly smooth.
It's fairly smooth.
I'll take fairly smooth.
So right, here we go. You can see that we've got the texture there. I'm going to leave it just for a few seconds just to dry off just a tiny bit before I then grab a piece of kitchen towel and start to buff it up. So I'm going to increase the lathe speed a little bit. That's up to 1300 now, maybe a little bit higher. And using the kitchen towel, I'm going to buff that gold wax off the surface. And you can see there now that we've got a nice clean texture with the gold wax in, and it's also buffing up to a really nice shine on its own. And then if I stop the lathe, you can see that we've got a really nice sort of antique-y look and an antique-y feel to the piece just there. Now if we wanted to, we could overcoat that with some gloss wax, which I think we'll do. I'll use exactly the same piece of kitchen towel that I buffed it up with and just get a little bit of the gloss wax on there. That's far too much, so I'll just run that on just to give it a little bit of an overcoat of the gloss. And then buff that up as well. Now remember, when it comes to buffing is not a burnish. I see quite a lot of people applying a lot of pressure to their finishing waxes, particularly the Hampshire Sheen gloss wax that I've just used. You don't need to. All you need is just finger pressure, just enough to hold the towel onto the piece in order to polish the wax, not burnish it up to a super glossy shine, because as you can see, it already is a super glossy shine, even with just a little bit of finger pressure. And there we go. Little bit of texture, nicely coloured, nice shiny finish on it too. So now we're going to swap back again. You ready?
Here we go.
We're going to swap back. So I need to unplug my mic, so we will go quiet for a few seconds. Hang on, I need to turn that one off.
Right, I think I'm working again. Am I work? Yep, according to my little bars going up and down, I think I'm working. Right, so we can take that off there, put that aside. Okay, so I think we're all back to me again. Okay, so I'm just going to literally just take back to that line there, which will tie in with the. What have you just done there? Right, I've just literally just cut the end just to give me an idea that or give me a place where the stem is going to key into the base. Okay, in order to do is find a chuck key. I think Martin's been in the workshop now. He's moved stuff now. Well, my chuck key. Wow, I'm very particular about what chuck key I use. I have to use yours, Martin. Right, so what we're going to do, we can take that off there and put that aside. That's ready now to accept the base, the stem I mean. Now we're going to do the next thing, which is the stem. Okay, so this is a stem center drive or crown drive, depending on where you buy them from. And obviously, what I would normally do is have a tool rest long enough that was the whole length of the piece. Now I don't think we have that luxury today, so we'll just work with what we've got, which means I will need to move a tool rest. Now I will move a tool rest with the lathe running, okay, which is obviously not best practice. I don't particularly have a massive issue in doing it because I feel confident enough that I'm not going to hit the wood. But obviously, if you're a beginner or if you're turning something with squares on natural edge, stop the lathe before you move the tool rest. I'm just going to do it for speed. today. Right, so what we're going to do is the tool rest is just below centre, and we're going to make this make it round. Now, the reason we're using oak is literally it will give us the ability to be able to show you another technique that's important to have good sanding. And what we're going to do is we're going to do like a liming technique to pick out the grain of the oak. So the wood is now spinning at around the 1200 RPM mark. Okay, and all I'm going to do is make a series of roughing cuts with my roughing gouge. And I'm going to take it down to my maximum to the diameter of my maximum, or take it diameter of the widest part on the stem. Okay, now I'm not going to copy turn this. I'm just going to mark it out. But obviously, if I was making more than these, I would have a board. Okay, that marks out the details. I'm literally going to just do it by eye. Okay, so we're just going to go in there and just create a little flat on the end. So using the multi-purpose tool. So there's our little flat on the end. The other end, on this end, I'm just going to mark my spigot. Okay, so that will be the spigot that goes into the base. And then I'm just going to roughly mark the details on the piece. Okay, that will give me an idea of where I want the details to be. Of course, if you had the book, you can scale up or scale down. Okay, you can play about moving details around to try and give you the best shape that you want. Okay, but we're literally just going to slightly wing it. When I say wing it, I do this for the job, so it's probably a little bit more controlled than a wing. That's the top detail sized out. Okay, and that's all I'm going to do at the moment. The reason that is because if I start putting bottom detail in here, I'm going to make the top too weak. So that's all done with the multi-purpose tool. It's a very quick way of removing it. But of course you can use a parting tool if you so wish. Okay, so this detail at the top, this spigot at the top is going to fit into my bottom of my bowl, so it needs to be the same size as my chucking recess. Okay, so I'm just going to roughly check that. Okay, that was a pretty good guess. So I'm happy with that. So that's going to fit into the base of the bowl. And now we're going to just do the shape with our what I want you to see, or want you, whenever I'm teaching how much you have to body when you're so that's all waste. Now I have a couple of options here. This little bead here I could do with a skew, so I could pick up another skew to do it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it with a spindle gouge. And the reason I'm going to do it with a spindle gouge is because actually the spindle gouge is in my hands. So of course I could pick up a skew But if the tool's in my hand, why pick up another tool? Okay, so there's our bead there, there's our shape there, and now we're ready to do the rest of the shaping. The quick turning doesn't come from jumping around and moving really quick. It comes from just the effectiveness of your technique. Now what's going to happen now, because I'm not going to use a steady, these smaller details, I may get a little bit of vibration on the work, which we can overcome in a minute. It's something I'm almost expected to happen. So I've just gone over to the roughing gouge. The roughing gouge is a very effective tool for shaping spindle work, but do be careful with that. As I come down here, what I've got to be aware of is this large unsupported edge here, that I don't lay that into that bead. So I'm making sure I stop nice and short when I get to there. I'm actually going to take that down in diameter a bit. I think it's a little bit too big. And then just flow the cut, and I'd be looking to see to probably get that the same diameter as that. So we'll just go back to the other spindle gouge, and we need to blend those shapes together. So we can do that with a spindle gouge like that in a push cut. Okay, and then we just flow that, and I can just start to feel the timber vibrating slightly underneath the cut of the tool. We'll see if we can got there's a little bit of a vibration mark on here, okay, but that's not an issue. We can deal with that with our abrasive. So there's our shape there so far. So we've got that nice sort of flowing vase shape. And if you want to feel whether you got it right, just run your finger down it, okay, and feel if it's right. I can feel I've got a little lump there, so I can just ride the bevel, take that lump off there. Or if I wanted to, if I felt happy to do that, and if you feel happy to do that, you could just run down with a skew like so. But only do that if you're happy to do it. Okay, don't bother doing it unless you're incredibly or happily proficient with the skew. Don't run the risk of ruining it, because we'll talk through how to blend those together in a minute when we do the sanding. Now you can hear that the piece is starting to be quite thin. Okay, so I need to flow that round into there. So there's my bevel. And then right round into that little corner there. Make sure that you've got a nice curve there. There. And of course I could put a steady on at this point. Okay, but I'm going to work without the steady. Not on purpose, but slightly on purpose. Now, remember I talked earlier on about the... There's a reason I use a 30mm trigger, okay? And is this set of calipers. Okay, this set of calipers I've had for a number of years, and you can see the little knob's broken on the end, and it's stuck on 30mm, so it's always perfect, see? So this is my 30mm there. The other reason that I use 30, or I like 30, is you'll see it's a bigger diameter than my drive. I see people using 1 inch and 7/8 or 25mm and 22mm. Right. And that would be sized before shape or vase shape. Okay. And I'm going to give you a little hint if you struggle to turn this shape. Okay, the secret to turning on a is to maintain that flat as long as possible. If you maintain that flat as long as possible between those two lines, you'll always find it easier just to come in there and just improve the shape. If you remove that, you'll struggle to get it right. So we're going to come in here and we're just going to create a little tiny groove in there. I should be quite proficient at that shape actually, because I'm turning a okay, and this diameter there is very important. Okay, and for that reason I'm going to run to my workshop while Mark Les runs back. Okay, because what happens here, this diameter has to tie in to the base. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the diameter across there. Okay, so if we can see that. Okay, and I'm going to transfer that to that base there. So that diameter on the base here, okay, should now tie in with if I don't knock it off, of course. Right, so here's our cove. I'm not getting too involved in specific tooling today. Obviously, those of you who've watched me in the past know that I can get quite technical in my demonstrations, but this isn't that type of demonstration tonight. But I'm sure if you tune into some of our other ones, we can get very technical. Okay, so here we're going to go in there, and then we're going to create that little tiny narrow cove in there, into there, into there. So I've not really used the skew that much at all, because most of the detailing is done with the spindle gouge. I'm happy to do the detailing with the spindle gouge. Okay, I don't feel like I need to pick up another tool to do it. So I'm just going to check that that 30mm diameter there, because obviously when I take it off I want it to fit in there perfectly. Okay, right, so what did I do with my verniers? I put them down somewhere sensible. Okay, obviously not. So that's fine, we'll trust it. Oh, they're on the top there. You're all shouting at me going, they're on the top of the computer and I can't hear you. Okay, so what we have there is our piece. We're just going to make sure it ties into the bottom, and then we're going to sand it up. Okay, so that fits in there like so. Okay, so if we can come on to the, so you can see the tie-in between the two surfaces there, so it actually starts to look absolutely fine. Okay.
What size is your spindle gouge?
It's 1/2 inch, so it's made of the spindle gouge that I use, which is my signature tool. Okay, which is this one. This is 1/2 inch. Okay, so measured in the English spindle gouge way, so it's 13.5 inch diameter bar. Okay. Available from the Woodturning Shop. Available exclusively from the Woodturning Shop. Okay, so I'm going to put the fan up behind me so it blows the dust away from me, and now we're going to talk about sanding spindles. Okay, now obviously I sand spindles, I'm sanding spindles for a living most of the time, okay, so I try to do it as effectively as possible. I hate sanding, okay, it's a necessary evil, and it's a thing that has to be done well. Now this is going to have to be done well because we're going to use it, or Martin's going to use a technique that's going to pick the grain out. Because it's going to pick the grain out, if I left big scratches in it, it will pick the scratches out as well. So I need to sand this as well as I can. So general consensus is we sand underneath, like so. Okay, I actually don't sand underneath. I prefer to sand over the back. Now this to me is 100% safe to sand in this position. Where's not safe to sand is on the top there. So if you think about it, if you put your finger there, it throws it off. So that is the unsafe place to sand. So once again, I keep the abrasive moving. Now, oak is really interesting because oak blunts abrasive. In my experience, it's probably about the worst wood there is. And for that reason, I like to use probably the abrasive that has the most longevity, which isn't necessarily the cheapest or designed for spindle work or designed for this type of work. So quite often I would go on to using the Indasa. Okay, so even though it's Velcro backed and we're not using the Velcro backed aspect of it for this, it actually works really well on oak. The problem we have is it's not quite as flexible. Okay, it's not quite as flexible. So you really have to make sure that you are getting it to conform into those bits there. So that nice U shape there, create that area there. Once again, if you can, keep it moving, keep it going as round as possible. Imagine you are a random orbital sanding machine. Okay, and then through the grit. That was started with a bit of 120. I probably didn't need the 120, but the 120 did get rid of that tiny vibration mark, I hope. If not, it will be found out by the wax. So once again, keep it rotating. And we're going to sand down to 240 to 320, I think. Yeah, 320 grit. It should be enough for this. Once again, I can almost feel the abrasive mounting quite quickly on the oak. It's just one of those woods that's not very forgiving. Now, probably what the most expensive abrasive you can get, generally available, I suppose, is something like Abranet. And I like Abranet, but I definitely wouldn't use Abranet on the oak. Okay, you're just going to kill it, or in my experience, you just kill it quickly. I tend to use Abranet on something like the rosewoods or pine, to clog up the abrasive. So nice sharp abrasive. Remember that it's not going to last as long as it normally would on another species. And if you've got any long sweeps like that, just turn the lathe off, sand it with the grain wherever possible. Remember, you only ever see sanding marks across the grain. And I will to deal with in a minute. So remember, we've only sanded to 320. You could go to 400 if you wanted, but I think on this particular piece of oak, I think 320 is enough. Okay, and all the difference is if I was doing this commercially, okay, this was going off to be stained, I would just give it a quick burnish, either with some shavings, just to make it look better to the customer, and also the shavings will show any marks before you go out. Or if I wanted to, if I found the shavings were quite scratchy, you could use the back of the abrasive to do the same thing, and it just makes the piece look a little bit more presentable when the customer is loading it in the back of their car, if that was a new post, something like that. So that's a pretty good finish on that. I'm happy with that. It fits into the base, and I'm going to hand over to Martin again. Okay, and
I've switched this mic on. Yeah, if you switch yours off, I'll connect to that one.
okay, perfect. And I can answer all the technical questions now.
Right, and that should be me now. Yep, that looks like me. That's helpful. I can't unplug this now. Oh, because it's fucking. Oh, the joys. I've broken something. Never mind, I will just do that instead. Right, okay. I can't unplug this now, so I'll have to come back and switch over. Okay. Switch the cameras. Okay, right, hopefully I'm sure you can still see me. Yes, you can.
You can tell me what to press, Martin. What could go wrong?
The
can't go any worse.
All I need you to press is that one on and that one off.
Okay.
That's it, that one, spindle cam.
What, now?
No, in a minute, I'll tell you. I'll tell you when.
Off, on, off.
Right, okay, I need to turn my mic up because I'm not using the... Turn that one up there, that should be a bit better. And I'll just put that up as well. Okay, right. Right, okie doke. Right, okay, so let's have sanded this down to 320 grit. It looks pretty good. So what I've actually, whilst I've been sat over there trying to sort out the audio issues and any streaming ones, which there aren't any, we are going out a-okay. So if you are experiencing streaming problems, I'm afraid there is still nothing I can do about it. I can't make the stream any better than it is. I'm going to use an airbrush on this, and I have literally just decided over there.
I said you were going to wax it.
I am. There's a... Sue Pritchard, you have shorts on. Right, I've switched on the airbrush because what I want to do here is I am going to put a little feather on there, really dark, to kind of blend in with this a little bit. So I'm just going to let the compressor build up some pressure, and then I'll find the gun and the earth colour just while I'm down here. There it is.
Martin's always praying for my spindle turners.
That works. Good. Stick that in there. Right, now as Les said, we are going to be embellishing. Can we go over the head, please? Thank you. We are going to be embellishing this with some coloured wax, so I do need to clean this grain out as much as I possibly can, and there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can use a liming brush like this one. This is a brass bristled liming brush. Try saying that when you've had too much to drink. Fairly soft bristles, they're quite long as well, and these brushes work really well on really hard woods like oak and ash to get dust out of grain. You could also use a shoe brush, a clean shoe brush of course, but absolutely the best way to do it is to use compressed air. So I'll just give that a little blow off. There's some water coming out of it. I see what you mean now about those water traps. Okay, so we've cleaned all the grain out. It's very important that you do get the grain clean. So the embellishing wax or the liming wax or the gilt cream or whatever it is that you put in there has somewhere to go. Clean grain means you can actually get the product actually into the grain. And I've also done it before adding colour. Can we just go hit the spindle button again? And I've also done it before we've added colour too, because obviously trying to get wet dust out of a teeny tiny little hole is not going to be very easy at all. So clean the grain out first, then add your colour. Over the top please. Thank you. Okay, right, this is the bottom over here. So what I want to do here is I want to put just a little feather of colour coming up over here, and then probably very slightly fading out around here as well. And I'll put my little board underneath there as much as I can. It doesn't quite fit, but it's good enough. Start the lathe up, and I want the lathe to be running fairly quickly at this point. Fairly quickly, so we can feather that in, and then just take some light strokes just here, and then we'll feather that out just up here. You see that? Just a little bit more. There we go, just like that. A little bit higher, I think, about halfway up, just about there. One more for luck. There we go, and that's all we're going to need on there. And if you look really carefully, if I just zoom this camera in a touch and just sort the focus out for you, you will be able to see, you can see there that we've still got some of the nice clean white grain where we've taken the dust out. Now normally if I wasn't going to be filling this in with embellishing wax, I would make sure that the entire piece, including inside the grain, had the colour on, because I don't want to be able to see these tiny little flecks of white. So I'll just come back out again, move the camera over there. Okay, now that colour is still a little bit wet, so I will encourage it to dry with some kitchen towel this time. I could use the hot air gun if I wanted to, but this is another way that you can encourage colour to dry, by just giving it a little rub, a little burnish with some kitchen towel. Again, don't use cotton cloth or anything like that for this process, because if it catches, it can pull your hands into the lathe and it'll all end up being a horrible mess. And then when that's done, whoops, dropped it. When that's done, we can apply a single coat of sanding sealer. Thank you very much. Apply a single coat of sanding sealer. I do like to apply at least one coat of sanding sealer before embellishing waxes, because I like the more subtle effect you get with those waxes when some of the grain at least is sealed up using the sealer. The sealer fills up all of the teeny tiny little bits of grain, leaving the more open ones to accept the wax. So there's a bit there. Now as you can see from the towel there on the lathe, it has, the cellulose sanding sealer has pulled a little bit of the colour off the piece, but that doesn't bother me at all, because I still want to see the colour of the wood, or rather the grain of the wood, underneath the colour. And you can see here what I did this time was I moved from right to left, because if any of the colour does bleed, I would rather it bleed this way back into the colour than bleed further up the piece. Put a little bit more on just to get some, just to get some right in that little bit there and up there.
See, if I'd have rounded it all over with the sandpaper, I might find it easier to apply the finish.
Yeah.
All that fine detail.
Okay, super. Right, now we can encourage it to dry. Remember, I don't normally recommend that you encourage sanding sealer to dry like this because of the chance of it sort of congealing and going all thick. Or at least you can obviously do it. If you want to, just make sure that you take your time over it and you don't force it to dry. There we go, just encourage that to dry. Now it's very important, I haven't mentioned this before, it's very important that you allow the sealer to dry between, or rather allow each step of your finishing process to dry before you move on to the next one. Because products like the cellulose sanding sealer or anything with a solvent in, if it's not dry when you start applying your next step, the solvents in your previous step will start to dissolve your subsequent step. Make sense? Okay, right back over the top, please. Okay, so we've got the gold on the base here, and I think I could make this a little bit darker if I wanted to, but I don't think we're going to have time to, but I'm quite happy with that as it is. So now we're going to put some gold all over this piece to pick out that grain nice and subtly. I'll use the same piece of kitchen towel that I did last time. Rub that in nice and deeply all over. Now these waxes and also colours will pick out any little fault in tooling. If you've left any tool marks in your piece or any sanding marks, embellishing wax, liming wax, gilt cream, colour will always pick them out and they will stick out like a sore thumb. So it's really important that you get the surface that you're applying the finish to be, oh sorry, can you go back over, thank you. It's really important you get that surface as smooth as you possibly can.
Obviously with my work it's perfect.
It is exceptionally good.
Ah, see. The more I practice, the luckier I get. So.
Right, now we'll move up onto the paler part of the wood.
If it made so much difference, just that little sand with the grain at the end, it just helps. Us as wood turners, we get fixated with doing everything with the lathe going round. But actually it's probably quicker to sand it effectively with the lathe off, especially as sort of a bottle detail like we have on this.
And I'm going to throw a little bit more in this detail here because that's going to be really difficult to get to when it comes to buffing this up, and right down here as well, just in that little detail. So that bit of gold that's left in here, here and here, and to a lesser degree in here and in here, are going to stand out really, really nicely when we get this buffed up, adding to the antique look and feel that this is turning out to be. Okay,
completely different to what we discussed.
it is completely different to what we discussed, isn't it? But it looks nice, I think, the little with that little fade in there.
We'll see.
Okay, well, there we go. So now I've got a piece of kitchen towel, I've folded it up nicely so it's a nice thick pad, and then just with a little bit of finger pressure, just buff that wax off the surface, leaving it just in the grain. We don't really want this wax, or we don't really want the grain on the surface. Sorry, we don't really want the gold on the surface. We only want it in that grain.
Martin, Ben wants to know how colour fast the gilt creams are, or the embellishing waxes. Will they fade?
I've not known them to fade after 4 years.
I think most of the pigments that we use as turners now are pretty good. and quite resistant to UV and stuff like that. Coming from the sort of antique world and stuff like that, I think they are quite good.
Okay, and I'm going to put. You can see now that wax has really picked out that grain. You can see it really nicely down here in the dark brown, and then how it just fades to a much more subtle effect further up. And I will put on one more coat. One more coat. Now you can see I'm turning the lathe with my hand rather than having the lathe running. That makes sure that, you know, there's definitely no chance of this kitchen towel being caught, and I can get everywhere that I want to. Okay. Get the lathe spinning and then we can buff that up. Speed it up a little bit.
Of course, you can use this technique on a candlestick, a lamp, bud bars, anything like that, anything with the grain running in that direction. And it's quite interesting if you look at that shape now where Martin's got the frames that might work. It actually, you know, if you think about it, that's a bar stuck on top of a hollow form, isn't it? So those sorts of shapes are timeless, and that's where that book comes into its own. So the book is Classic Forms, and it's written by Stuart Dias. So D-Y-A-S.
I'll see if I can find that when we swap back again in a minute.
That'd be brilliant. It's probably the best book you'll ever buy as a return.
There we are. Super. I'll just zoom that in one more time and just follow it up. So there's the base, and that has just been buffed up with the embellishing wax itself. There's been no gloss finish on there at all.
If you could just stay there, that bit there. You see those fillets, those straight fillets? If I knew Martin was going to do that technique, I would have actually curved the fillets in like the one underneath. Martin could point to the one underneath the pot, that one. Okay, I would have curved the other ones in because the gold, you see how the gold's gone into that straight fillet? Okay, it's gone into that fillet. It looks much better than the ones that are flat. Okay, so if you look at the other three don't look quite as nice as that curved in one. So in hindsight, you know, if we're going to do that technique, it might be worth curving it in. So that's a small design feature, but I think actually having seen it close up like that, it obviously would work better with them just cut in into a more bird beak design rather than a flat fillet. Every day's a school day, as they say.
And there we go.
Done.
Yep.
Right, people are saying your microphone is better than my microphone.
Yes, I've spotted that as well, so we'll just give you this one. And I will examine that one and see what might be up with it. Now this one just sit on your lapel.
Right, so are we working? Can you hear me better now? Give me a thumbs up or throw something at the screen. Oh, I can't see that. It'd be funny though, wouldn't it?
I'm sure people have been throwing things at their screen.
Martin has. You know, it's funny, isn't it? That you know, we can do whatever we like, but the tech's always a bit of a problem. Right. So we're going to take that off and we're going to sit that in the base. Okay, but I'm not going to show it to you yet. It looks a bit odd. Actually doesn't look too bad. Hey ho. Right, so bowl turning. So we've got to do the bit on the top. I haven't got a massive amount of time to turn a bowl, but we'll give it our best shot if I can find the knockout bar. The knockout bar, it's on a. It's not stuck where it normally is. So that's quite funny. I'm not a bowl turner. Like, you know, and people say, well, you know, I don't production turn thousands and thousands of bowls. I'm not, you know, I'm not Glenn Lucas by any stretch of the imagination. But I can turn bowls, and I do turn bowls if required. And I do, you know, I've done small runs of them, sort of 20, 30, 40 bowls. Okay, but I just transfer those techniques that I learned in my spindle turning over into bowl turning. Okay, so we need to work quite quickly now, because we don't want to work all night. Well, I don't want to work all night anyway. I am having tomorrow off. I'm going to Bournemouth Air Show, so if you're going to Bournemouth Air Show as well, keep an eye out for me. Mine's a cider, thank you very much. Okay, oh, that's just undone there. The third method for mounting the top of the bowl. So what we have here is a piece of air dried sycamore again. Okay, it's actually the other side of the board from the base. This is some 5-inch sycamore that I've had for a number of years. It does turn quite nicely. So what we're going to do on this, we're going to work on the back. Okay, once again, we're not going to go too much into the tooling aspect of it. Okay, we will try and turn it quite quickly. Generally, if I was working this, I would recommend you wear a full face mask at this point rather than a pair of safety glasses, because obviously if that comes off. But when I'm working, I generally try and work out of the firing line if possible. So here's our long grind tool. Now, because I'm holding it on a screw chuck on quite small jaws, I may get a little bit of a vibration on there, but I'm not going to force it off. I'm just going to enjoy making those shavings. So I'm just slicing the timber. I'm basically trying to unravel the timber, so I'm trying to remove the wood how it wants to be removed. I haven't turned sycamore for ages. You can see why so many demonstrators turn sycamore, can't you? So even though this is dry, we're still getting great shavings on here, and all I'm worrying about at the moment is removing stock. Okay, I'm not worried too much about shape, apart from obviously I don't want to remove a piece of wood that I want. So I'm actually going to do a very simple curve on this. And normally I would do an OG, but I'm actually going to just do a simple curve on this because I think that's going to work better. So there's the shaping. Of course, I could do a push cut if I wanted to, as opposed to a pull cut. And to aid me in my simple curve, it's alright, I've just pulled the I'm going to use a curved tool rest. Now, generally I don't bother swapping tool rest, but it does make life a little bit easier in this respect. Okay, so hopefully the lathe still works after me yanking the speed control off. So here's my push cut. So there's my shaping cut, or my rough shaping cut. Okay, so there's my bowl done, pretty much to the curve of the tool rest. We're more than happy with that at this stage, and now we need to do a recess. Now, the recess discussion, you know, recess versus spigot discussion, is basically there for another day. Okay, but I do need to use a recess on this because I'm going to use it as part of the design. So I need to take the measurement off the top of this. Okay, so I'm going to go slightly smaller. Okay, I'm going to go slightly smaller, and then I'm going to make sure it fits before I go any further. Okay, so I'm going to go slightly smaller than that, because if I make it bigger I'm a bit stuffed, and then I'm actually just going to offer it up as I take it away. Now the important thing about a recess is, and where a lot of people get it wrong, is it needs to be into the body of the bowl. Okay, what I don't want to do is expand into a little tiny foot where I'm expanding into short grain there, because that will not be a good hold. And you know, it needs to be able to be strong enough to be able to withstand, I wouldn't say it withstand a massive dig in, but it needs to withstand the odd little whoops-a-daisy when it comes to tool control. So we're going to go in there, and we're going to make it quite a deep recess, much deeper than we probably need it, to make sure that the spigot, sorry, the recess, no, the spigot, I was right, the spigot from the bowl, from the spigot from the stem even, I will get it right eventually. It's like I'm saying things and giving you about 4 options, and you can pick the one that actually is actually right tonight.
One of them is going to be right.
Pardon, Martin?
Yeah, one of them is going to be right.
Right, exactly. So maybe we ought to do that. Maybe we ought to just do treat it more like a quiz. So that's a much bigger recess than I would normally use. Oh, why have I done that just the wrong size? So I'm going to have to take that down. I knew that was going to happen. Why did I... No, you noticed that. Who noticed that then? That I've just marked the... Now luckily for me, okay, that bowl was slightly too thick. Okay, that bowl was slightly too thick to conform.
Yeah, I thought it was a bit too thick as well.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah,
definitely needed that.
Yeah, it definitely needed that bit. Okay. Right, that's definitely too small now, so that should be perfect. Here, right, here we go again. It was better when my microphone didn't work. Right, so we're going to dig a hole in here. I prefer to use a gouge for that. I know people just tend to push in the multi-purpose tool or a parting tool. I just find that a little bit quicker. And now we're just going to stop and check. And if we got it wrong again, it would be a very floppy fit. Now, what I can do, because it's easier to turn the stem down to suit the bowl, I could get it somewhere close and then turn the stem down in a minute, because the stem obviously will go back between centres, no problem whatsoever. So we'll get it somewhere close. Remember that each bit you take off the bit same on the other side as well. Now you can see what's happening now. Because I did it wrong just now, I am erring very much on the side of caution. Okay, so I'm properly creeping up on it. So we're going to put a little tiny dovetail on that.
Les has just used a skew to put that dovetail on.
Yeah, just as it's skew as a scraper, and that's not far off there at all. So in there again. I don't need much angle on there to be right. Okay, so that's in there now. Okay, so that's going to be a nice tight fit in there. And the trouble is, being side grain, this being side grain, it will move slightly. But all I want to do before I go any further is just put that in like that and mark roughly the diameter on the outside there, because that will give me the idea. Because once again, like with the base, I like my stem to tie in with the other bit. Not a very good line that, so that's on there like that. So now we can just go in and do our shape, and then Martin can come in and do what he wants. Now I need to get the tailstock out of the way because I'm going to finish it with a push cut. Need to get the tool rest in nice and tight, and we're going to try and do this in one pass. As I'm coming around here, I think the tailstock's going to be in the way. It is. So bevel rubbing cut, no scraping involved, just come round. Okay, want to make sure that I get the whole diameter in. I've not quite got that yet. I could have fixed the diameter before I go. So ride the bevel, pick the cut up. Quite often I would use a 1/4 inch bowl gouge for this. Okay, a little bit of a bounce on the end grain there. And there's our shaped round. Okay, so we're now ready for the next part, which is the sanding part. Is that alright you to throw some stuff on?
Yeah, I thought you were going to put a lip on it.
Oh, am I going to put a lip on it?
Yeah, like the other one.
Oh, now he tells me. What, up at the top here?
Yeah, I thought you were going to put a little, yeah.
Well, I thought we were going to do, yeah, see, Martin changed what he was going to do to the stem.
Yeah.
And because I changed what I was going to do to this, that's not allowed, is it? You want that?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah, a little bit deeper, please.
Right, so now I've got to go a little deeper. Well, I'll come right underneath it again, so I've got to come all the way around to here. Now this thumb on the top grip, this is probably the only time in turning that I go for my hand over. So this sort of thumb on the top grip. Just with the finishing cuts on side grain. The reason for that is I like to put pressure downwards rather than into the bowl. And the thumb, being a very powerful digit, is very good at putting pressure down that way rather than inwards. Like that. More?
No, I think that looks pretty good actually. Yeah,
Okay.
I like that.
There we go. So we're going to do something with that rim in a minute.
Yep.
Okay, we can see the proportion by sticking the stem on. Okay, the stem looks perfectly in proportion to that. Okay, and now we're just going to talk through sanding this and how I sand the outside of the bowl. Now, of course, we could use the abrasive against there like we did before. The only trouble about that is it does create a lot of friction, so it can generate heat. And the other thing is it's not quite as effective as power sanding. We could use an inertia sander, which is a sander that we hold against the piece and it revolves, and we could do that. So in effect, it's in the handle and goes up. I prefer power sanding. Okay, I prefer the ease of finish that I get with power sanding. Okay, but once again we need to get it in the right place. So I'm going to sneak the lathe down a click. So basically, in effect, I've gone from 900 to 700. And we have to put the drill in a place where we can control it. The other thing you want to do when you're power sanding is you want to use as much of the sanding disc as possible. So don't just sand on that edge there, try and use as much of the disc as possible. apply light pressure. You don't make sandpaper cut better by pressing hard. Okay, you make sandpaper cut by pressing at the right amount. So that started with 120. Once again, I probably might have started with 180. Okay, but I've got them in wrong order here anyway. 180, 240.
You got them in the wrong order?
Yeah, it's fine. Okay, you need to try and get the pad exactly in the centre there, and then if you're lucky it will just conform up against under that lip there. But always worth just giving it a little, but once again keep it moving. And generally I wouldn't really do that until I went on with the 240 at that stage. So once again, using it where it's sensible. Okay, so either there or under there. I find it a little bit easier to control if I'm here. Notice I'm holding it with both hands. And once again, if it starts to go shiny like this, you are rubbing it, not sanding it. Okay, so you need to be sanding the piece. I laid all my discs out perfectly in order, and now they're not. Let's just turn the extractor on. Okay. So it's quite interesting actually, the comments you get in demonstrations at times are, why are you showing us sanding? We obviously know how to do that. Now my experience is looking at a lot of people's turning is actually they probably don't know how to sand effectively. Okay, that is a better surface. I'm going to recut that edge in a minute. So I'm just going to try and go over that edge. How are we doing on time, boss?
It is 8:33.
8:23. Perfect. So Martin's going to come and throw something on this, and then we're going to turn it round, and I'm going to dig the inside out. Okay, and then we're going to show you how to sand the inside, and then we're all going to go off home. Okay, right. So am I handing it over to you? We'll turn the dust extractor off. We are sharing microphones now, so not very COVID friendly, but we do work in the workshop next door, so we're fine. Okay, so I'm going to hand that over.
Thank you. Right, and this time it's that button. Tailstock button. Tailstock.
It's confusing me.
Tailstock this time.
He's giving me another button to press.
Right, okay, that's a nice piece that, I'm liking that, although because we have a nice brown bottom here, we do need to, I think at least, we go to the tailstock, we do need to at least do some kind of mirroring between this texture here and this texture here. Shut up. So I'm going to go back to the texturing tool in a minute, because I do also want to put some colour on there as well. Found the texturing tool, put that over there because we don't need that just yet. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to fade up a little bit of brown just up to here so we have a nice plain edge, and then put the gold wax in through the texture and right up underneath here. I think that's still switched on, which is good. Okay, put my lathe bed protector on. Move that out of the way. Now notice that I haven't bothered trying to clean out the grain on this because the grain is so tight. You won't get the dust out of any of the really tiny grain there. So I'll start the lathe up. It's running fairly quick. I want it up to about 1300 RPM, something like that. And I'm going to start at the bottom and just fade up here a little bit. A little bit more. Now, as I'm doing the airbrushing, can we go back to the front? Cool. As I'm spraying on the colour here, in order to get that gradient edge up here, I'm pulling the airbrush away. That spreads the spray even further. I'll do it one more time from this angle so you can see. And I'm moving it away, and then that gives us that nice feather at the top here. Let me just switch off a sec. Go back rather.
Remember that the bit at the bottom will be covered if you think that looks a bit odd.
And then when we put that on there, can you hit the spindle button? There we go. And then when that joins on there, that's not going to look too bad because I'm going to put a little bit of texture on the bottom here and a little band about there, I think. Thank you. Okay, so that's the colour on there. I'll give it a little bit of a burnish off with some paper towel. These are water-based colours, of course. The intrinsic colours are water-based, so they do raise the grain a little bit. But just with a tiny little going over with a kitchen towel, just like that, you end up with a really nice smooth surface again. And then we'll go with the sanding sealer. I'm going to put quite a lot of sanding sealer on here because there's quite a large surface area, and I find the best thing to do with sanding sealer is get it on quickly and evenly. If you don't get it on quickly and evenly, what can happen is it can leave you with tide lines, and they look really bad. So get plenty of sanding sealer on the towel. Anybody who's watched my lives before will know that I always spill a bit on the floor. It's a bit of a good luck charm, I think. Although not this evening. So we'll get plenty of that on, and you can see it's gone on quickly and easily. It's darkened that nice earth colour that we've got on here, and I'll put a little bit of encouragement for it to dry. Before we stop the lathe and put on a second coat. And if we also put it into the,
put any in there.
I was going to say, if we do put it in the recess, it just helps firm those fibres up. You don't need to.
Not on this one because it will be full of glue.
It will be full of glue. And there we are. And then we'll encourage that to dry as well. Ooh. Definitely mustn't get it too hot because I'll say it again, it will congeal and start to leave lines on the piece, and that's definitely something you don't want to have happen because they look unsightly and they're really difficult to get rid of.
And the other thing I see people do now is they use shavings. Don't use shavings now, they're too scratchy. You'll ruin your surface.
Okay, so we can see the little witness mark there that Les has left there, that little reference line there. I'm going to come a little bit higher up than that to about there. And then we'll put a little belt of texture on there and maybe one just at the top here as well. I haven't quite decided yet, but definitely one under here.
There's nothing like having a plan.
Well, as the piece has developed, I've changed my mind.
My OCD won't allow that.
Okay.
I have to work to plans the whole time.
Go with that one now. Okay, slow the lathe right down. Again, I don't want it any more than about 480 RPM. That'll do 450, that's okay. Make sure that the tool rest is at a height that when the tool's presented to the piece, it's cutting right on the centre line. That's a little bit too low.
Once again, those who missed it earlier on, it's always worth having a little bit of a practice before you commit to, on the blank, before you commit to your finished shape.
Certainly is. So we'll put a little bit of texture there and just give it a little twist, and that will give us a wider cut. Little drag across the tool rest will give us a band. Tilt it back up again, just there, and we'll do two more I think. One there and one there. Stop the lathe and have a look. Nice texture. Now, just as we did before on the bottom, we're going to use a point tool just to put some little borders on there, some extra little lines, just to help create a slightly more intense pattern, I suppose you could say. Speed the lathe up. We go back to the tailstock. That's it. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to put one at the end here, one in between each of the bands of texture, and then one at the bottom. So I'll put one there, one there. Get these lines nicely in between the bands of texture. We'll put one there and one there for luck, and then we'll stop there and have a look. That looks nice. That looks very nice. Sorted. Right. And then we'll go back to our grey pad and just knock off any fluffy bits that are left over. These texturing tools can pull the grain out a little bit, but with a little going over with one of these grey pads, it's not a problem. Now, can we go back to me? Thank you. Now, I do have a little bit of a dilemma. It's not really a dilemma, it's just a design choice. If I put gold on here, that's going to be a really subtle effect and not stand out quite as much as the gold on the base. So I think I will go with gold, just purely because I know gold looks nice. Well, I know they all look nice, but I just want to make sure that we do have some kind of reflection, mirror image, repeat pattern, something like that. So I'm going to get plenty on. We've got a nice deep texture here. Can you go back to the end, please, Liz? And we'll put that on. And you can see that gold getting nicely into that texture. I did press a little bit harder with the texturing tool this time, so this texture is nice and deep. In fact, what I might do, I think, is go over the top of that with a black. That's a brave choice, isn't it? What do you think? Go over it with black?
I think whatever. I think it would. I would have done the whole thing black.
Let's get the black out. So this is going to give us, going over the top of the gold like this is going to give us a sort of a goldy effect. Now that is very brave. That's very, very brave, and we'll get that right under there as well.
I'm just thinking that we've got enough time to cut it all off and start again at this stage.
No, we'll be alright. Now this will pick out, this will darken down the whole piece a little bit, which won't be a bad thing because we do have a darker piece of wood underneath it, remember. And I'm also being careful not to get any wax inside the recess because that's where it's going to be glued, and of course glue doesn't like sticking to wax very much, so try not to get any wax inside the recess. And we'll give this a little buff up. And we'll take it off the surface, remember. There we go, it's coming up a little bit lighter, but it's going to be a touch darker.
And it'll pick out that band at the top as well.
And it'll pick out the band just under here too.
We probably don't need to do anything else to that, I think. We want to get the inside of the bowl hollowed out. If that picks up the band,
oh, you want it on this band?
no, underneath the band.
Oh, underneath, yeah,
Trust me, just go underneath the band and then
Yeah, I am.
We'll do something on the top. I've got an idea. So if that looks good up to that fillet, I think we can.
That looks nice.
We can leave it like that, and then we'll go to the next stage.
Now, one thing you can do, I'll just cover this very quickly. Can you hit the spindle cam for me a sec? That's it. One thing we can do is, if you happen to get to a point where, there we go, where you do have some wax on the surface, like this, what you can do, I think you can just about see that there's a little bit of wax on the surface. What we can do at this point is we can take some oil, or even better, just a little bit of white spirit. Oil's good, and then we can just rub that oil on there, and that will start to take any surface wax off. We're not worrying about this bit here because Les is going to be turning that bit, so we can just go around here and just take off any surface wax that we don't want.
Does it show it on the rag when you take it off? Turn the rag? Yeah, there you go.
So that's a very quick and easy way. That's a very quick and easy way to get rid of any surface wax. And because it's sealed, that oil isn't going to penetrate the wood. So we can just give that a little buff off, and you can see there's still a little bit of wax coming off there. And then we've got a nice shiny bowl.
Perfect.
Lovely. Right, we can swap back again now.
And we'll dispose of that oily rag properly in a minute.
We will. There's the mic back.
There's actually the odd little sanding mark on that, but I'll excuse myself for not checking it. Okay.
Richard feeling the oil was Hampshire Sheen Danish. Leslie's just getting the mic on.
Okay, right. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to use that. That could come off there a little bit more as well. So a little bit more oil on there to take that off. Okay, there's a little bit under there that we can rub off. And actually, saying that, because there's still a little bit of oil on the surface, you probably, with a little bit of elbow grease, you could probably work that around there. Okay, just to get more of a black line, more of a clean line under that surface. But I am going to cut that over. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure, because the way my recess sizes are going tonight, I'm going to make sure that the chuck will fit in there. Okay, so this is the same chuck as what we've got on there.
There's a nice view of the texture on the bottom, just while Les is sorting out the chuck sizes.
So we know the chuck, we know it's going to fit on, so we're not going to have any unknowns when we take this off. Then we're going to turn it round. I'm going to turn the bead on the top. Okay, I'm going to turn the bead on the top. I'm going to sand it. I'm going to get Martin to come in and airbrush it. So he's going to airbrush the bead to tie in with that area there, which I think, you know,
okay.
If he's going to think on his feet, so am I.
Okay.
Actually, either either that or I'll airbrush it. Okay, so screw chuck off, and then on there, expanding to recess there. Make sure it's seated properly and expand in. Remember that you're only trying to pinch the bowl. You're not trying to split the bowl in two by graunching this as hard as you can. It's running pretty true. we'll go back to the flat for the rest. Now, because we're so kind to you guys, there is a bit of an offer, and because if some of you know from the Woodturning Shop, because the building work is going on at the moment, the building we are shut at the shop to anybody apart from customers that book in to see us. So for about 24 hours, just over 24 hours, we are offering you guys a 10% discount on anything that's not already discounted. Okay, so not on courses, I'm afraid, but on the finishes that we've used tonight, there's 10% off. The airbrush system has not got 10% off, but the colours, the waxes, the finishes, and the abrasives, some of the abrasives that we use tonight.
And the tools.
And the tools.
Yeah, of course.
Of course. Right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to, so if you all got that, we'll put it up again at the end. Okay, I'm just going to round over this into it. I'm going to try quite a big chunky bead. Okay, there. So it's like a little shear scrape round there. I find it easier than trying to rub a bevel as we go round. Okay, so I'm going to keep going round there. Now this is quite an awkward one. I'm going to come up underneath. Okay, once again, what I don't want to do is drop the tip of the tool in. And I could do it with a scraper type tool if I took fine cuts. So there's our little bead on the top. Now the reason we're going to use an airbrush on this is what we don't want to do is we don't want to bleed the tip. We don't want to put too much on and run the risk of the stain, of the intrinsic stain bleeding into the grain, especially in the part of the bowl that I want to be sort of natural wood. So we're just working that area in there.
Just got a little question here from Thomas.
Yeah.
Thomas, is it still a pain in the posterior to send outside the UK? It is rather. It is a little bit of a pain in the backside for us to ship outside of the UK, but if you're ordering tools, then yes, no problem. I don't know where you are. If you are in the EU, yes, we can ship out to the EU, but Hampshire Sheen, for example, does have distributors in Europe if you're looking for Hampshire Sheen products. Otherwise, we can ship anything we want into Europe. Over to the US is very difficult.
Right, so all I'm going to do now is I'm going to finish over into here. Okay, and I'm going to finish with a fillet. Okay, so I'm just going to go in there now and just with the multi-purpose tool create a little fillet in there. A little tiny flat there, and I don't actually know at this point whether the flat will stay there or whether it won't stay there. It will depend on how well the finish goes on. So we're just going to talk very quickly about how we sand that area across there. So once again, on with the abrasives that are horribly not in order anymore. Okay, I'm a little bit lax in demonstrations about throwing stuff down.
That was my fault.
Not really. It's Martin's fault. Thank you, Martin.
I did mess those up for you. I'm sorry.
He had to say that because if obviously when I watch it all back, I'll have noticed him moving it and confusing me on purpose. Because that's what I'm going to do when I go home tonight. I'm going to watch all this back.
Have you got nothing better to do?
That was a slight sarcastic comment. Right, so we're going to sand that, making sure that obviously I don't touch that outer edge. You can see that I keep all the abrasives in my hand. So what's going to happen when it's airbrushed is that we're only going to put a very, very, very small amount of stain, and it pretty much dries on contact. Even the waterborne stains that will dry slower than the spirit stains will dry that little bit slower. Something turned off. Okay, so I'll just carry on, Martin.
Yep.
So blow that off. We've just bought some water traps for our airline because we've been having problems with water, and I don't think they're quite man enough. Yeah, definitely. Shall I have a go what you're mucking about with that? Shall I just have a go at airbrushing it?
Yeah, you have a go at that. One of the cameras has dropped.
Okay, so I'll have a go at airbrushing. Okay, so just gonna literally. So I'm going to creep up on that edge. There.
Just while Les is doing that, Mark Richardson, yes, Mark Richardson is on order. We're expecting it in October. We placed the order in July. We're expecting the delivery in October.
Okay, so that's the earth colour through the, and then obviously you can finish the insides of that and finish that and make that shiny the same as we can do. And that's a very, very small amount of stain on there, so hopefully there shouldn't be any bleed. If we'd have put it on with a brush, we'd run the risk of putting a lot on there, and obviously with wood being, you know, designed to suck moisture through the grain, or to suck food, sugars and stuff like that through the grain, we obviously would have that same problem with our stain. So now what we're going to do, now we're going to go in there and we're going to dig the inside of the bowl out, and then the inside of the bowl will be natural. It doesn't have to be, but we're going to leave it natural for the demo tonight because it's now getting on a bit. It's now 9 o'clock UK time, so it's way past my bedtime. Okay, right, so now we're going to hold the bowl out. I'm going to push. There's nothing worse than the tech guys appearing on shot, is there? So I'm just going to hollow the bowl out. God. Got no cameras. Okay, right. So it's one of those nights everything's going wrong, isn't it?
It's just a nightmare.
It's not the worst thing that can happen. I'm just easing it through. Right.
Right, bear with me a minute. I just need to shut something down, and we'll be back in a second. Sorry, folks, we'll be back shortly. I think that actually went out.
Good job we're not getting paid for this, wasn't it?
Yeah. Things never not go to plan when we do
A free one.
And
We're obviously better off when we're paid. I think we. They can probably hear us. If you can hear me talking.
They can, because the mic's being taken from the mics.
Okay. So you can hear us, see?
Yeah.
Because we're not swearing too much.
Wave your hand in front of something. Ah, there we go. It's working again.
Ooh.
Splendid.
Right, let's go back to it. Right, we're back again. Yay.
Yay. Right. Okay. Do you want
Right.
Sorry about that, folks. I think everything is. We can. I think things are getting a little bit overheated.
Now the important thing to remember when you're bowl turning is to use your hearing sense. And what I mean by that is you want to feel like you're cutting the wood. See, when I do that cut, I'm pushing straight into the end grain there. Okay. So I'm not really removing wood how it wants to be cut, and you can see that. You can see those cuts here are rough. This cut's smooth, this cut's rough. So what I do in the middle is I still do a push cut at times, but I can work it down like that. The sound is much nicer. Now I'm not doing a pull cut, I'm not trying to come up the side there because that's dangerous. But this, if you think about it, this is a bevel in contact cut. The bevel is in contact with the wood. I'm riding the bevel and I'm working it down like that. Now some woods I find I don't need to do that. I mean, ash I can normally work all the way through to the middle. So now I have to think about whether I want to leave that little tiny step there. Okay. Oh. Whether we're going the right way, it might make it easier. So I've gone to the 1/4 inch bowl gouge, and that's measured as a UK 1/4 inch. So actually, stateside that would be a 3/8 bowl gouge. And I can work it round, and the 1/4 inch bowl gouge, especially on the wood that's quite dense like the sycamore, will just give us that slightly cleaner cut when we go round. So I'm actually going to leave that little tiny step, but I'm actually going to make it very small. So there's our cut, you can see. How sweet that cut is. With a small bowl gouge. And I'm a massive advocate of the smallest bowl gouge. I find it just gives you that slightly sweeter cut as we go round. But the limitation, of course, is when it overhangs a tool rest. When it overhangs a tool rest too far, we then need to go to the bigger bowl gouge. Now I understand how unexciting it is just watching me dig a bowl out, so we will just speed up things a little bit. Obviously with a recess I have to be a little bit careful about going too deep. I don't want to join the funnel club. Okay, so we're just going to go in there and I'm just going to finish that curve round into there. And then I'm going to show you how I'm going to sand it. So there's my curve. I'm going to show you one little technique to try and practice. Okay, and that's that little technique you've got when you've got a little ridge in here. Okay, so we've got a ridge there. Okay, so coming to that ridge. If you feel like you've got to do that cut again, just slide the tool back on the bevel and then pick the cut up. Once you understand how to ride a bevel, it's not that difficult to do. Just slide that tool back on the bevel. And then advance it forward. Now you're going to see those little ridges in there, and we'll talk about those in a minute. Those ridges have come a little bit off the bevel of the tool, and I'll show you what we can get rid of those in a minute. So what I'm going to do is I've just gone to the 60-degree bowl gouge. Once again, we can. The benefits of this tool are for another day. Okay, I've not measured it at all, but I'm definitely erring on the side of caution. We've got a little tiny bit in the bottom, and I'm going to flow that round and create a bowl that has a nice internal curve with no flats. Okay, so we're not too far off there. Okay, so we've got a really good curve in there. Like I said, there's the odd little ridge in there, but that's not a problem because I'm going to show you how to get rid of those. So one of the things I say, if you've got those little ridges there, is to go in there and with a scraper and do that cut. I don't think there's a need for that at all. I've got no torn out grain. Okay, the finish is you know, cut wise it's absolutely fine, but there are a few little marks in there that have come off the bevel. So I'm more than happy to take those out with abrasive, but we need to sand smart. So I'm purposely going to start with a coarse abrasive. Okay, I'm purposely going to start with 80 grit. If we can have the dust extractor on, please, Martin. I'm going to have a quick drink. So that's the extractor's on. So we're going to go with 80 grit, and we're going to sand smart, because when we're using 80 grit, we need, this is a tool. Okay. People joke about this being the like the 80 grit gouge or something like that. But it is, especially with the coarser grades where we're trying to remove those little marks or those ridges in there. We need to make sure that we sand the shape that we want. So we need to put the drill in there and we need to sand that perfect curve. If we put the drill in there and do all this sorts of things, it's going to sand a more uneven surface. So for that reason, I like to power sand at 3 o'clock. Now, if I was hand sanding, I'll be hand sanding in this quadrant here because that's safe. But when I power sand, I like to power sand over there. And what I find is with the drill going that way and the bowl going that way, that's it being effective. So I'm going to run out to 3 o'clock. I'm going to work across the centre. Now, importantly, when I go across the centre, I need the drill, the centre of this pad, to be exactly in the centre of the bowl. Okay, so what I've got there now is I've now got rid of the ridges. Now, ideally, if you can find some good quality 100 grit, would be to go to 100 grit now from 80 before you went to 120. So I'm going straight to 120. Once again, sand that area there. Sand across the area there. Sand across the area there. Once again, if it starts to get shiny, your abrasive is blunt. Okay, so that's a good surface again. And then it's just a matter of going through the grits. Okay, if they're in the right order. I'm only going to sand to 180. Okay, Martin wants me to go to 400, so we will go to 400, and then he can use his new oil on it. Once again, you only need to put enough pressure on the pad to get it to conform into the shape. Any more pressure than that, you're just destroying the life of your sanding pad. So in there, and then down to 400. He says it's probably that one. The thing is, it's 9 o'clock at night. I've been turning since 8:30 this morning. I've just about had enough of turning today. I've made some shavings though, that's for sure. I've made a lot of shavings today. So
I can vouch for that. There are an awful lot of shavings in your workshop.
I made a lot of shavings. So I'm just going to take that off. Okay. Now, one little thing I can tell you that's worth doing. Okay. Obviously, not at 9 o'clock at night. Would be to take it outside now and look at it in the sunlight. Okay. And the reason for that is the sunlight will show better than any other light if there's any scratches on there. Okay. So take it out, look at it in the sunlight, and that will display anything you've got a problem. Take the chuck off, take it out there, and look, especially if you're doing a competition piece. Okay. So what we have there is basically a very well sanded bowl. Okay. The curve is pretty good, if I say so myself. I have to, because nobody else will. Right, one little thing that I have to flag up is there is an event happening in London in the middle of October called Wizardry in Wood. Okay, so come along to that if you can. There are tickets available on the Wizardry in Wood website. Okay, so if you search Wizardry in Wood, there's competitions that you can enter with large, very large cash prizes. Okay, come along if you can. There'll be 14 of the best wood turners in the world displaying their work. There's also an ornamental turner called, I can't remember his first name, Champignon is his surname, and his work is mind-blowing. Okay, I mean properly mind-blowing. So come along and see us there. Okay, come along and have a chat with us there. Martin will be demonstrating on a couple of the days.
Yeah, I think I'm demonstrating on the Tuesday evening, Wednesday and Thursday.
Perfect. So he'll be demonstrating there. So it won't be open on the Tuesday evening for the general public, I'm afraid. It's only a livery dinner, livery function, that one. So, but come along to that. Come along and see us. Enter the competitions. It's 10 quid a ticket. Okay, it's in Carpenter's Hall in the City of London, and there is now a link put onto the. There we go. Look at that. That was clever, wasn't it?
It's clever, isn't it?
That's really clever, isn't it? So that was just waffling on. Just click the link. Much easier. Right then, I'm going to hand over to Martin, who's going to just put his oil onto it. So I'm going to hand the microphone over. So this will probably be the last. Well, it won't be quite. There we go.
Right. Oh, okay, there we go.
It seems like now all the kids are off the internet.
Yeah, everybody's gone to bed. Everything seems to be running okay.
All the kids have gone to bed and stopped gaming now. I think that
See, it's not our fault.
No, it's not our fault. It's kids on games.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okie doke. Now we sanded it down. Now we need to think. In this case, we're going to say this is a pedestal fruit bowl. So obviously we need to be thinking about a food safe finish that we can put on the inside. Now we could use a food safe wax, which is great, or we could use an oil, and that's what I'm going to be using this evening. I'm going to be using Hampshire Sheen's brand new citrus burnishing oil. It smells amazing and it goes on a dream. And once you've burnished it off, it's essentially fit to use. Now, if we're going with a fruit bowl or a salad bowl, for example, waxes are fine. However, all waxes are susceptible to acid. So if you get tomato juice on a wax finish, for example, or an apple starts to go off in your fruit bowl, then the acid that leaks out in the juice is going to have a detrimental effect to the wax you put on. But that's not the case when it comes to oil finishes, particularly drying oil finishes like the Hampshire Sheen Food and Toy Safe Danish oil, or, as I've said, the citrus burnishing oil. Both of these products conform and are certified to EN 71 Part 3 2019. There we are, get rid of that. Right, quickly just change the camera, and we'll go with the tailstock cam for a minute. So here's the tin, citrus burnishing oil, nice brightly coloured so you won't miss it on the shelf. We have it in stock at the Woodturning Shop, and don't forget you can get 10% off until tomorrow evening on this, and it really does smell of oranges. It is absolutely lovely. So I'm going to get a little bit on the towel, or a fair amount on the towel. Look, there it is. It's a nice light oil, and we just roll that in the piece there like that. Make sure we get it all over, and we can put it on the colour as well. The solvent on the solvent in here doesn't disrupt the intrinsic colour collection, so we can put it on the rim as well. Make sure we get that in there, and we can just leave it for a few seconds to soak in a bit before we grab a piece of kitchen towel and burnish it up.
Am I supposed to be pressing buttons, Martin?
No, that's right, I've done it.
I'm texting my fans.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm texting my fans.
Okay, so there we are. You can see there that it's pretty much soaked in. I can still feel a little bit on the surface, which is fine. So if we spin the lathe up, make sure you are wearing safety glasses on here when you're doing this, because you should be wearing at least safety glasses all the time when you're turning.
How long will it take to dry naturally?
Days and days and days. So you're better off definitely using it as a burnishing project like this, and I'm putting a little bit of pressure on here just to make sure that it gets warm. We don't want it to get too hot, and if you're doing an end grain project, definitely don't get it too hot. Take your time.
No, I actually do put it on let it dry naturally, and I sort of quite like the idea. It does give a really good finish, but you do have to wait a while for it to dry.
Richard Phelan, can you ship that oil to Northern Ireland? Richard, yes, of course. Shipping over to Northern Ireland isn't a problem. However, Sam and Linda at the Woodshed in County Antrim, are they in County Antrim?
Is it Temple Patrick?
Yeah. In County Antrim have just taken a delivery, which I think included the burnishing oil. Mark Richardson, is there any timber that this oil won't work on as well as others? Not that I've really figured out, to be honest, Mark. I probably wouldn't use it. I personally probably wouldn't use it on exotic woods or something like that. I would probably just use it on sort of English hardwoods, that kind of thing. And if I was to be doing a project with an exotic wood, I would stick with the Danish. But you know, it's each to their own. You can do what you like. As you can see here, it's now on there. It's pretty much dry. Does need a little bit more burnishing, but it doesn't give you a glossy finish. That's the one really nice thing about this oil, is it gives you a nice even satin finish. Just give that another little bit of a run over. Now we could put another coat on if we like and do exactly the same thing, but make sure the first one's dry first, of course. That's important, because otherwise the oil on the top will dry quicker than the oil underneath, and then you can get in all sorts of mess. So just make sure, as I said earlier, that each step of your finishing process is dry before you move on to the next one.
Would you cut it back in between each coat?
I wouldn't cut it back between each coat, no, because you're putting on quite a lot of pressure with the towel here. What I have found is that it just leaves the surface nice and smooth, so there's no real need to cut it back, I don't think. And then there we are, there it is finished. Can we just switch to the tailstock cam, please? That's it. Thank you. And you can see we've got a nice satin finish in there. You'll have to take my word for it, it is as smooth as a baby's bum. It is really, really nice, particularly if you've sanded down to 400 grit. And then to check to see if it has dried, you can take a clean piece of towel, give it quite a firm rub, and see if any of the oil comes off on the towel. And if it doesn't, you're good to go, and you're left with a super sweet smelling fruit bowl, or a salad bowl, fruit bowl in this case. And that citrus smell will dissipate over a few days as the last few bits of the orange solvent evaporates away.
Do you want to put it together then?
Yes, let's put it together.
No, I need to put it together.
Oh, I'll put it together. Okay.
You get it together.
I'm going to.
Comfortable sat here.
Okay, I'm
I
going to.
thought your job was quite hard when I was demonstrating. I was pressing the odd button every now and again.
Well, it is sometimes trying to second guess what you're going to do next. Okay, there we go. That does feel really nice. Now here's our base. Here's our base and our stem, which I'll put just there, and then chuck key. That way, make sure I don't drop it.
Should still fit. That's why I'm getting you to do it, in case it doesn't. Does it fit? If it doesn't, just balance it on there and pretend, Martin.
That is a really nice fit. That.
Ah, there you go. See, like I said, the more I practice,
Ooh.
the luckier I get.
And there it is. What I'll do is I'll stick it up here. I'll put it up. Oops. Bang it on the camera.
Bang on the camera. Put a little dent in it. It's
Move
now
that.
lopsided now, isn't it?
It's,
It's a proper tight fit.
that is a really good fit. I won't push it on too much. Just give it a little bit of a dust off.
So I'm not sure it all works together, but it's sort of.
Oh, I don't know.
It's sort of
Can you hit the tailstock cam, please? And I'll tilt that back. I'll move that down. Lift this up.
Advertising there.
And then we'll zoom in at the bottom. Ooh. Just there.
And do that slow, very arty shot as it goes up through. And just about to show the top. That is a proper joint. He hasn't pushed it on, so don't
No, I
worry
haven't.
about that gap at the top.
Yeah, I haven't pushed it on entirely
Actually,
properly.
I'm going to push that on.
Go on then. That's better.
That's better. There we go. So now you can. So you can see it's tied in a bit better. It is actually a little bit tight. I could probably put it back between centres and just sneak a tiny bit off. Right, guys. Do you have any questions before we go home? Once again, we do apologise for any internet trouble beforehand, but it was out of our hands. It tends to be, well, luckily, it tends to be the free ones that cause us the trouble. The paid demos that we do are generally okay. Okay. So don't forget to come along to the Woodturning Shop. Okay, have a look at what we sell. At the moment we are building stocks up slowly, but if there's anything you think we desperately should stock, some tool you've seen somewhere, by all means give us a shout and we will look into it.
That's great. One thing I do
Obviously,
just
all
need
this
to do.
white stuff, this is not grey hairs, this is dust.
There we go. Let's just talk about the club offer again, or the club offer. That's the normal graphic for the club offer that I've just amended.
So MSSLES, so 10 at the checkout, and it expires tomorrow night at midnight. Well, 11:59.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's 10% off everything that we have in stock, including the Hampshire Sheen stuff, a new range of abrasives, tools and everything. But if it is a bundle product, then I'm afraid it's already discounted, and it's also not valid for tuition either. So there we are. Thank you very much indeed for watching.
Just Joe, John, James Foster, okay, don't order the new burning oil, please. It's burnishing oil.
Yes, it's not burning oil.
It's not,
Please don't burn it. It is flammable. It says so on the tin. Please do not. Just keep it away from all naked flames. It is flammable, just like every other oil virtually on the market. So if you do have any comments or queries, then please do get in touch via the website www.thewoodturningshop.com, and we'll be very happy to answer any queries you may have. And don't forget, for the moment we are open only by appointment, as the website does say. So
give us a call, come and see us. If not, we'll see you when we're open. There will be some demos coming up, hopefully in the winter. Some live demos,
some in-person stuff, and people can come.
Stuff. Yeah. So that we can I can cover you in shavings then. Anyway, guys.
Brilliant. We're going to swap over, and I can turn everything off. So thank you very much indeed, everybody. It's been wonderful to see you all. Again, apologies for the technical issues at the beginning. They were out of our control, and they were internet issues outside of us. So we went out okay, but sorry. Anyway, that's it. Thanks, everybody. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.